I'm Greg Nettle. I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, and we plant churches throughout the United States and around the world that intentionally and strategically care for children. We found that combining new church planting with intentionally and strategically caring for children produces exponential kingdom results. Really excited about this webinar today. I have two very, very special guests that are going to be joining us. As you come in, use the chat bar and let us know. Wow, we have Kevin from the UK. Great to have you with us from Stockport. Fantastic. Use the Q&A bar if you have questions throughout. We'll be answering your questions as you come in. As you stream in, just to remind you, this webinar is put on by Stadia Church Planting, and we're very, very interested in the digital world, as I know you are as well. Welcome, Matt from Bowling Green, Kentucky. Stadia started getting involved in digital last fall. Little did we know. We thought we had a 2-year R&D period to get our digital team off the ground. Fortunately, we had hired Jeff Reed, who's just an amazing guru in technology and digital world, church world, and hired him in January. And so we got our team built before any of the pandemic hit. And so we were able to hit the ground running. Stadia operates 100% virtually. So this is kind of our normative space. My normal day consists of having meetings just like this, kind of face-to-face with a partner in Ecuador, and then maybe somebody in India, our entire staff on a Zoom call with our staff team. So this is kind of normative for us to operate in this world. Certainly it's ramped up with the number and hours of Zoom calls. But my goodness, I hope you all are taking advantage of the opportunities. We're using this now to connect with, I've been having virtual coffees with people, a couple a week just to spend 15 minutes touching base. And I've had virtual lunches with our teams and different people. And it's amazing what we can do virtually now to stay connected and move the ball forward. So as you come in, just one last reminder, I'm Greg Nettle with Stadia Church Planting. So glad you're with us. We have this amazing webinar today. Use the chat bar. Feel free to make comments and go, what the heck is that on the screen over there? For many of this, I just had my son up to see DJ in his virtual expression online. And it was really fun for him to see that and get his, kind of juices flowing, because I pray every day for him to grow up and be a preacher of the gospel. And he knows that. So, and he's got it down to two things now. It'll either be a NASCAR driver or a preacher of the gospel. I guess virtually he could be either. Now he watches the NASCAR races every Sunday now online, which is kind of crazy. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. We have two guests with us today. Jeff Reed is with us. And Jeff, we brought on the Stadia staff. Boy, we went after him hard. After we met last fall, Jeff, you were part of a Blue Sky session with Stadia on Is Digital Church Even a Possibility? Digital Church Planting. And we came out of that Blue Sky saying, it is imperative that we move in that direction, little knowing that this pandemic was going to occur. And so we started conversations with Jeff, who's kind of, I refer to him as the LeBron James of digital church world in the United States. And so we're delighted to have Jeff. Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you were doing with Digital Church and then what you're doing now with Stadia.
Yeah, thank you very much. Glad to be here. So Jeff Reed, I came from about 15 years church staffing experience, mega church, giga church kind of mentality, multi-site church, launched a dozen campuses. And towards the end of that church staffing run, started really pressing and focusing on church online, digital church, really it's been a passion of mine over a couple decades. Even way back 20 years ago out of college, was doing Bible studies online. And so trying to create community in digital space has always been a passion, and starting to help churches more and more wrestle with that as I was working in that space. Interestingly, God kind of led on my heart a couple years ago to step out of a church staff experience and to start a company called thechurch.digital, where basically we help churches figure out how to do church online, and wrestled a lot with this idea of a digital-only church, which, by the way, pre-COVID was probably one of the most controversial things I would ever talk about.
Jeff, that was one of the conversations when we were at the Blue Sky event together. you were so delighted to be in a room with 10 people, 10 really significant tech leaders from across the country, and some major church leaders that were actually excited about digital platform.
Yeah, like it's, and I don't mean to overstate, but it's the thing that I loved about Stadia is because so often in life I would cast a vision towards church online, towards community online, towards digital community, digital church planting. And I was told by high level leaders and influencers, no, you can't do that. No, that's wrong. No, that's as far as Jeff, you're a sin because you're pulling people away from the bride of Christ. And so, I mean, the first time I met Greg Nettle and I'm looking at him face to face, and he's like casting his vision for what he sees the church doing. And I'm like, dang it, that's exactly what I want to do. Here's a guy who has the exact same vision of what it means. And so, Greg talks about how it was a hard sell. It was a hard sell on my end to jump on the team because I'm like, I love where this organization's going. I love their passion towards it. How can we work together to that end? And so came on staff January as director of digital church planting. I think I was on staff 6 weeks before COVID hit, which was funny because all that controversial, and I'm sure DJ will dive into it, but all the controversy surrounding a digital only expression of church, yeah, all those pastors who were like, it's a sin. You're taking people away from the bride of Christ. I will never broadcast the service. Those pastors were calling me on the phone. Hey, Jeff, can you help us here? We're in dire straits. And so I don't assume that COVID changed the Bible. So like all the theological concerns that were pre-COVID, like I don't think the Bible changed. I just think there was a lot of opinions. And the reality is it's an opinion. We can do the things in digital community and still pay honor and homage and hold to the biblical standards that are in place in Acts 2 and others. And so by utilizing technology to reach in the digital community in this COVID season, we're impacting people in a whole new way. And coming out of this COVID season, I think we've got an opportunity to not go back to the physical building, but really to add physical locations to this new digital first strategy that'll help the church moving forward.
All right. Hey, Jocko from South Africa, great to have you with us, my friend. Hey, we also have DJ Soto with us. DJ is the lead visionary leader of VR Church. DJ, tell us a little bit about what's going on. People are kind of loving this and asking questions, and talk to us about what's going on in your world now, my friend.
Sure, absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is DJ Soto. I'm the lead pastor of Virtual Reality Church. We're a church that exists entirely online in the metaverse. We've been around since 2016. I guess 2017 is when we got established. We were experimenting the year of 2016. But before that, had over 20 years of ministry experience, big churches, small churches, mega, traditional, I mean, you name it, Baptist, Pentecostals. It was all around just exploring God's kingdom. And we were part of a quite large church in Southeast Pennsylvania, and I was one of their campus pastors there. And it was about 2016 where we felt God wanted us to do something new. We didn't know exactly what new meant. We thought that meant plant physical churches. And that was about the same time virtual reality came out. And I'm actually in virtual reality right now. I'm wearing my headset. I'm going to try to grab it. This is kind of covering my head right here. I have hand trackers, and I'm going to maybe do a wider shot here. As I look around, all around this environment, I can see up and down and left and right, and it's so immersive. And this is kind of like what virtual reality church is like. It's a bit different. This is a platform for Zoom, but what we can do is virtual reality brings back the sense of presence, where we, high five each other, give each other hugs, say hello. The serendipitous conversations before and after church that you have. And so it's hard to explain. It's if you've seen The Matrix, there's this point where Morpheus tells Neo, you can't explain what the Matrix is. You have to experience it for yourself. And in our journey, that has been nothing but true, because it's been hard to explain it. We've traveled all over trying to fundraise, trying to cast vision, and there's this blank stare, with leaders and pastors and organizations. But once we put the VR headset on them, and even better yet, experience virtual reality church, the light bulb comes on. Let me give a quick example real fast. I was at a conference, casting vision, talking about VR church, and the automated response is, this can't be church, that doesn't count, et cetera, et cetera. And there was one pastor who was adamantly believing that. I didn't know that. Met with them, said, hey, I have an extra headset. Why don't you come to VR Church with me on Sunday? So he did. He came. He put on the VR headset. I actually brought him up on stage to talk about his ministry. And afterwards, he took it off and says, I get it now, and I want to do a virtual reality ministry. And man, if I could take that story and just multiply it over and over again, that's has been our experience. Before experiencing VR Church, no, that's not a thing. You can't have relationships. People are going to be fake. It's weird. After experiencing it, there's a total change in attitude and in theology. Like, I didn't convince him theologically or ecclesiologically about why VR Church or VR Ministries was valid. It was the experience that changed his mind, which is, I find, totally interesting in this COVID era. Like Jeff was alluding to, pre-COVID, church online, man, that's not a thing. You can't do that. You can't have church online. In this COVID era, I see that theology changing. It's like the experience and the circumstances has changed our theologies, because I know of churches, good churches, by the way, who would not broadcast online, very hesitant about digital ministries, would certainly not call it church online. And now they're saying, hey, come to church online, right? So in 2 weeks, that's kind of flipped for them. So anyways, long story short, my wife and I were church planners in virtual reality. We've planted in 3 metaverses, which is like 3 virtual reality cities. And we have, 3 churches already planted here in the metaverse, and we're looking to plant a couple more. So yeah, that's the nuts and bolts.
Man,
we are.
There are so many questions, DJ, that I want to ask you. And
yeah.
But and I just read an amazing article about your church in Wired magazine, and just really exciting stuff going on. Congratulations on all the good press you've been getting, and especially from unchurched people. That's been the really fun thing for me to watch.
Yeah.
Jeff, I want to come back to you, because one of the things we wrestled with pretty extensively, and I think, people need to be assured of, is, what makes a church? And is digital church a church? And theologically, is it okay? And because I think that's a fair question to ask, right? And as we talk about planting digital churches at Stadia, certainly we want to be able to respond and say, yes, we have worked through the theology of this. And so talk about that, Jeff, in how you're seeing, digital church really be the church in the same ways, if not better, than many local church expressions.
Yeah, I love that. There's this perception that the church is the 1 hour on Sunday. And so if you ask the average person what makes a church, they're going to say it's that church service piece. And the church service, the gathering of people in that space is important, but it's not the only piece of what makes a church a church. If you look at, Acts 2, and that's just even a great place to start. There's worship, there's teaching, there's communion, there's observing the ordinances, there's giving, there's options where it talks about justice and showing mercy, and a lot of the pieces of holistically of what makes church a church. And what's really been painful in this season, and we've talked about this in podcasts, where the most powerful piece of the perception, the most powerful piece of what made a church is that service. And for the past couple months through COVID, that piece has been taken off the board. And actually, there's an analogy in place where if you want to be a chess master, you take the queen off the board, and you're still able to win the chess match because you're able to use the rest of the pieces to win. And in this season, the church service is gone. And so we as the church body have really been struggling to adapt and to learn how to use the other pieces more effectively. In a digital environment, I would suggest that the church service is important, but through digital environments like things that DJ is doing, you have far more opportunities to be relational, to connect at individual levels, to build that relationship piece where I can have disciple-making relationships. I can coach and develop people at a more intimate level. People utilize technology, and I think overall churches, hey, let's broadcast our services so somebody in Ethiopia gets saved and gets baptized. That's awesome. Billy Graham in 1995, one message bounced off 30 satellites, 47 translators, a billion people heard one message. That was 25 years ago. The power of technology isn't to a billion people to hear it. The power of technology is let's interact with each other, let's engage and talk with each other. It's an intimacy technology. It's not cold. There are ways to overcome that, and that's some of the stuff DJ's doing right here, where through the metaverse, this guy's interacting with people that will never sit in physical space, and he's able to help them grow deeper in their faith. This is phenomenal stuff to see right here.
Yeah, and Jeff, one of the things when we went into this with Stadia that we were very convicted of, we weren't and we are not interested in helping churches just broadcast their weekend gatherings. That's fine if they want to do that. We are interested in creating environments, church expressions, where the full ordinances of the church can be expressed, experienced, where disciples can make disciples. I'll never forget Pat Gelsinger, who's the CEO of VMware, one of the largest tech companies in the world, number one CEO in the United States last year. And he challenged us. He's huge in church planting. And he said, Greg, team, we need to look at this digital expression, not to just be as good as local church or just a little bit less than local church, but he said it needs to be better at evangelism, better at discipleship, better at worship, better at community than the local church expression. And I sat there, I think my jaw was on the table saying, how in the world, and now we're going, oh, we know how in the world to see this happen. And so, as we think about our definition of what church is, it includes worship and it includes sacraments like communion and baptism and Bible-centered teaching and all of those things. So DJ, let me come back to you and say, how does some of those things practically play out in virtual free? I mean, how do you do communion? What does it look like? Is the Holy Spirit at work, in your church?
Yeah. Well, let me just back up just a touch. There's a point in my wife and I journey where we left the church. We were just in circles that we didn't want to be in anymore. We felt like we were abandoning our spiritual walk in God. And one of the things that brought us back was a church online experience back in 2005, maybe. I can't remember. Liquid Church in New Jersey had an online experience. And I started attending that church. I started being part of the chat. I would email the campus pastor for the online campus. So early on, I was already convinced of ministry that I experienced and that impacted my life, as far as 2005. And then the mega church I was a part of in 2010, we launched an online service. And one of the first visitors was an atheist, and there was another lady who was homebound and wasn't going to church. And it just sold me on the idea. It didn't take long for me in that conversation of, is this valid? Is this right? Can it be effective ministry? I mean, it just sold me immediately on that. So then fast forward to 2016, I'm already past all that and I'm ready to dive into the metaverse. And I think what surprises people is when they look under the hood of VR Church, because I think their initial reaction is confusion, maybe negative. Is it a cult? What's happening here? There's a lot of strange reaction that happens when they look under the hood and they see the depth of ministry, worship, prayer, Bible studies, discipleship, communion, the sacraments, all the elements of the church exist in the metaverse. And one thing, and this is another one hard to explain, but let me kind of present this thing that God is leading us into, is that he's been saying to us, VR Church, you need to reimagine the church, not replicate it. And so it would be, I'm just thinking about everyone that's getting into digital ministries, bringing their physical church online. Maybe take it through a filter that you're not trying to replicate one for one everything. And think about what are some reimagination that we can have.
DJ, I think that's really important really want our, those who are joining us today to hear that churches that have just taken their typical weekend gatherings and put them online, that's not really digital expression of church. That's just broadcasting. So we really do keep going with that. I love what you're saying.
Yeah. So, replication can be fine, but I think more the emphasis on reimagination, that takes hard work. And we're still trying to figure out what does that mean? Because someone would say, well, what are you talking about? And we're still sort of discovering because we did the replication. Now we're going through a reimagination. And so like, let me give you an example because I know this kind of vague. Well, one thing that we've done is sermons are not delivered from stage anymore. I used to, for like a good better part of a year, deliver my sermon on stage, had a PowerPoint, above my head type of thing. But then we're in virtual reality. The possibilities are endless because we control time and space. And so what we've done, every Sunday you come to VR Church, it's like a movie set. We start out in the church building. It kind of looks like a modern mega church type of feel, music, announcements, all that stuff. And then we leave the church building and walk through the experience. And we've done, it's incredible. It's, walking through the Red Sea, experiencing, for Easter, we walked the hill of Golgotha and went into the tomb. Virtual reality lets you experience the Bible, not just kind of sit and attain knowledge. You get to be tactile with your experience and your spirituality. It's been amazing. Like this Sunday, we've been going chapter by chapter through the book of Acts. So our World Build team has created the shipwreck from Acts chapter 27. That's where we're finishing up the book of Acts. So we're going to walk on the ship. There's rain effects coming down. We're on the rocks. We're going to go on the shore where there's a fire there. And so that's part of the reimagination we're going through. And I think there's many other ones that we're going to discover with discipleship, with relationships. And so that's kind of like where we're at, little sneak peek. And
wow, so I'm loving this. Now, not, just to be real candid, most churches aren't going to jump to VR right now. Right. Some will, which is really cool. We have a lot of church planters who are launching digitally now, and I love what they're doing. And the more that see this, I think we're going to have more church planters launching in VR world as well, which I'm really excited about. But let's talk about, kind of these steps of digital, Jeff. And, if somebody's saying, okay, I don't have the technology right now or the know-how to do VR necessarily, Jeff, what are you watching as, some first steps? What can people do right now, as we come out of this pandemic? I'm really encouraging churches, hey, don't just go back to business as usual. The world's never going to be the same again. What are some steps they can take right now to move into the digital world and keep it going?
Yeah. I love this. And I had a church earlier this week, maybe it was late last week. The lead pastor said, Jeff, our 2-year goal is to create a VR church. And I looked at the lead pastor and I was like, I'm really impressed right now because you know how to spell VR. Like I don't hear that language a lot from a lead pastor. The first step from a church standpoint, set the technology aside, we'll get to that. But from the church standpoint, the challenge I would say to them is figure out how to make a disciple. Because if you can make disciples who can make other disciples, if you can figure out how to create that process, it's then easy to find somebody who's passionate about virtual reality and unleash them on that area. By the way, this opens up a disciple-making process in a digital landscape, opens up a lot of potential. There's guys like Jate Earhart who's doing stuff with video games, and he's reaching 800 to 900 people through a platform called Discord, where he's literally, one guy's playing video games, one guy's reading the Bible, and they're broadcasting that on Twitch, and they're impacting dozens of people. There's life change happening as a result, and they're getting engaged.
Okay, Jeff, but I got to stop you because, most of the churches we're working with right now, they're not ready to jump to VR.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about, for the vast majority of churches right now that are going, hey, what if we just want to do something good as we come out of this with just, what 4G is allowing us to do right now really well on digital?
Yeah, so we're looking at places where community exists digitally. Reach into Facebook groups, build relationships with people within Facebook groups within your community. Challenge some of your high-level leaders and your people who are capable of being disciple makers. Where are areas that they're passionate about? Maybe there's an opportunity to create micro locations where you're utilizing technology to create new communities within areas of your city. Part of that discipleship process ultimately is training an individual to the place where they are passionate about reaching and influencing their circle of influence. So getting somebody to that place and then mobilizing them, empowering them to go to reach the people that they're passionate about.
So Jeff, we talk a lot at Stadia about phygital, which is the combination of the physical and the digital. And so, I think our kind of philosophy is, digital's fantastic, but if digital faith is not played out in the physical world, then boy, that's a tough question there to ask about disciple making. And so talk a little bit about the phygital idea and how digital also plays into the physical.
Sure. Yeah, there's a theory, it's called online to offline. The gospel that we learned in the online world has to affect our offline relationships, our physical world relationships. Let's take VR Church as an example. If the only place that an attender of DJ Soto's church in virtual reality, if the only place that somebody shows the fruits of the Spirit, the love, joy, peace, patience, if they only do that in virtual reality, but they're a jerk in the physical world, that's not a good thing, right? Like the information, the content, the stuff that we're processing digitally has to show itself physically. And so that's the standard that I challenge all churches, all church onlines, all digital church. Like, I love the fact that we're all Christians in Facebook, but we need to not just be Christians in Facebook. We need to be Christians to the neighbor.
I just think that is so humorous, Jeff, because I led a megachurch for years before I became the president of Stadia. And our big thing in megachurch world was, okay, we're gathering, 1,500 people in an auditorium numerous times a weekend. How do we get them? So they come in and they're showing the fruits of the Spirit in that weekend gathering. And you know what our big question was and problem? They leave the building and they're jerks when they leave, right? So this is not some new question from digital that digital's raising. This is the question of the church throughout history, where people, dichotomize the world of the church and the real world that they live in. VJ, talk about that. How do you address that in your church? How do you convince people that, hey, you can't just be a Christian here online. It's got to be lived out in your physical realm as well.
Yeah, I think spiritually, is what's your church expressing? Is it behavior modification or is it transformation? So if you put the big line in between those two, behavior modification, you could really, legalize the religious Christian experience. But if you're truly transforming people through the Word of God, through prayer, through discipleship, that's going to carry out into their normal lives. And so that's what we've seen. We've seen people whose lives have been touched by the gospel, and that has transformed their spirit. And now they're expressing that love from what Christ has done from them. So that can be done through a physical interaction, a church, a pulpit, that spiritual encouragement and transformation, or it can be done in virtual reality. So I don't know if it's the medium as much as it is the power of the message that is in someone's spirit, and that affects how they live.
So you're in your church. If we come to VR Church, you're going to be, teaching this incredible virtual experiential teaching, which I love that idea. But you're saying to people, hey, when you leave virtual world, this is how this applies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're not here just to attend a service, acquire knowledge. We're here to transform our lives, which we would assume would affect every interaction that you do, your money, your relationships, the way you treat your family, all those things. So absolutely.
Okay, so here's one of the fascinating things. I want to jump into just a little bit of tech stuff here in a minute, but one of the things as we've moved towards digital church, and we think about our move in America especially, and those of you who are around the world, I'm not sure where you're at with tech in your country in the world, so apply this however, but it wasn't that long ago in the United States where we were on 3G technology, and then we moved to 4G, and it changed dramatically. And inside of 2 years, for many of us, it will be in this next 12-month period. But inside of 2 years, everyone in the United States will be on 5G technology. And to understand the difference between that, when we were on 3G technology, if you wanted to download a 2-hour movie onto your iPad or your phone or whatever, it took about 6 hours to download that movie. When we went from 3G to 4G, to download that same movie, it moved to just about 6 minutes. Quantum leap in the band speed. When we go to 5G, it'll move from 6 minutes to 2.3 seconds. So almost instantaneous download of that movie. And what that's going to change, one of the reasons 5G is being, launched at all the big sporting venues right now around the United States is because they're getting ready for VR technology. So I can take my 83-year-old dad who can't walk up the stairs to watch the Cleveland Browns play in the stadium, but I can say, Dad, do you want to go to a Cleveland Browns game with me today? And he'll say, well, yeah, but I can't, and I'll say, well, Dad, just put on that headset that I bought you, and you and I can sit side by side, and we can be at the Cleveland Browns game on the 50-yard line. I mean, it's crazy. That's in the next 2 years. That'll be our new reality. The other thing that's really exciting is globally, 90% of the people on the planet will be connected on 4G on some device. And so think about the implications for the gospel with the world having the current technology we have on 4G. So DJ, talk just a little bit about, some of that change that's going to take place and how it is going to affect church.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, church leaders might get frustrated. I met with a pastor one time and he was like, oh, I'm retiring. I'm not gonna have to worry about VR, right? So I think there's a sense of like, oh man, what's next? We had our website down, our social media is cranking, we have a broadcast church, our digital vision is complete. And then now you start hearing about virtual reality and augmented reality. And so what's happening is, I heard this quote that I think is really important, is that we're leaving the information age and we're entering the experience age. And the experience age represents virtual reality and augmented reality. And so just as, let's say you're launching a church today, you would not think to like, we're not going to have a website or a social media or maybe even broadcast. You wouldn't think that. That'd be crazy. But it's only going to be a couple of years before you're going to say the same thing about virtual reality and augmented reality, where that's going to be an expected part of your experience. Now that might seem overwhelming or discouraging, but really what I've been encouraging people to do is to experiment. Just start experimenting with it. You don't have to launch a big VR thing. Get some headsets for your campus or for your church and start trying it out. And I think you'll start to make those little baby steps to be prepared for when the experience age, comes in full bloom. And I think that there's plenty of people in your church that would also love to dive into that and to be a part of that. This is really powerful. We've outsourced innovation in the church. I think this is an important point. I've heard Bobby Grinwald say we've outsourced innovation. And I think it's time to bring it back. I think you need to carve out a little R&D side of your church, just a small budget or just people passionate about experimentation. And I think that spirit of pioneering, experimentation, and innovation has kind of faded in our church circles, but I think it's time to bring it back. And VR is a great opportunity to start experimenting.
DJ, so we have some questions coming in. Yep. So if I want to join you in your virtual church, I don't have a headset. I don't know what headset to buy. I don't know what computer I need. Is it going to cost me, $5,000 to get, to be part of your church? Yeah. How do we get started if we just want to join you?
Right. So the easiest answer is at vrchurch.org. We have a visitor's guide that'll take you step by step about how to join us at VR Church. And one main thing to realize is that you don't need virtual reality. All these platforms we use can be accessible through a PC, a 2D screen. It's a totally different experience, but it's still very compelling. So you don't need VR. VR is the most preferred way. And if you just want me to give you another short answer, the Oculus Quest, if you want to write that down, Google Oculus Quest, and that is, in my opinion, the best VR headset to get right now. There's more powerful ones for you and tech enthusiasts that just want to, throw money at whatever. The Valve Index is probably the best high-end VR, but as far as something that's going to work just as simple as your iPhone, still great. Can access many virtual experiences. The Oculus Quest is the best one.
Okay, so let me ask you this. I think we're all curious. We're probably Googling now. So what's Oculus Quest going to cost me for that headset?
The Oculus Quest, I believe, starts around $400. And just a quick little thought around that. To get into VR, when it first came out in 2016, it was about $2,000. Computer VR headset. So even in this small amount of time, we're seeing the price lower. We're seeing the form factor getting smaller. One thing people might not realize is Facebook, Apple, Google, All of these companies are spending billions of dollars on virtual reality and augmented reality. And we haven't seen that full fruition of what's happening. So whatever's going to come out of that is going to be significant. Apple's really hush-hush about their project. And I can only imagine it's going to be amazing because of Apple's history. So,
okay, so if a church wants to get started, and or I've got church planners out there right now listening, and they're saying, "Yeah, I think I want to do this." Give me a price point. I mean, what if I want to plant a church, and I want to get the equipment to do my hands are going to move and all this stuff. What's a price point that we can jump in as a new church plant?
Just for yourself as a church planner, you just need the VR headset, the Oculus Quest, and you're ready to go. That $400, and you just planted a church.
No, that's no good. I need to pay at least $50,000 for a building. And,
yeah. There was a pastor that said, he saw me on the news or whatever, and he saw my building. He's like, I'm really jealous of this guy because he has a multi-million-dollar building that he didn't cost him anything to make. Yeah. So the platform we use is AltSpace VR, and anyone can use AltSpace. That's another one to Google. The Oculus Quest is one, and then AltSpace VR is the second one. AltSpace is our primary church plant. That's kind of where our, headquarters exist, if you will. And that's a great platform. You can build anything in there. You can use their templates. They have like auditorium templates. So you could literally get the headset, and you're ready to go with the template. And then obviously we've done custom creations. So we custom build, and we have our own building and our own environments. So we get fancy with it. But at the end of the day, you just need the headset, set up an event, and your church is launched.
Okay.
$500 per church plant.
Yeah. This is just going to change everything. Okay, Jeff, let me come back to you because Stadia, your work with Stadia right now, you're getting ready to launch cohorts and futurist groups and stuff. Talk a little bit about those and how people can get involved in getting, kind of taking, there are some of us that are going, man, we knew this wave was coming before the pandemic. We were, now we believe in it and what can happen. And we're not going to, a lot of churches, we're not anti-local church by any memes. We just think that this can augment a lot of church expressions and advance the gospel. But, what do I do now? And I still have lots of questions, and we've innovated to get our church services online, and we're doing a little bit of community groups and so forth. But man, how do we take that innovation and really flourish out of this? At the same time, we're continuing, and we're, re-entering over the next 2 years, which is really what I believe it's going to take to get back to what, all the experts are saying. We're in a 2-year window here now to get back to full local expression. So how do they get involved with you?
Yeah, I mean, DJ Soto's a great example here of not recreating, but of reimagining. Of innovating and doing something different to digital space. In this COVID season, we just recreated our physical ministry digitally. Hey, let's broadcast our services. Maybe it's a different look and feel, but it's still the same template. Maybe it's a shorter sermon, but it's still the same model of it. And through what DJ is doing, he's reimagining it in the digital space. I think we all have an opportunity here in this season we know how to do physical church well. I mean, here in this continent, we've been doing it for hundreds of years. Physical church, like we've got that model down. Really, within the past 6 weeks, 8 weeks, we were trying to figure out how to do digital. We use the language, and you've said it, Greg, of phygital, a melding, a merger of physical and digital together. And that's our goal, is to help churches through these learning communities and futurist groups figure out how to do phygital church well, how to utilize your existing church to create disciple makers, to expand and to plant, and to do things utilizing technology like what you see here in VR Church. Man, that is a really big Jeff Reed behind DJ Soto right now. If you can see that, that's really scary. But you've got this opportunity to do that. And so with Stadia, we're looking at a 6-month learning community. We've got close to 100 churches that were coming together to be part of this. Experts coming in from churches all across the country that are doing this well. Churches like Saddleback, churches like Church Home, a number of churches coming in and other vendors who are coming alongside. And we're creating these learning experiences and even futurist groups, a 3-year method to help churches understand how to plant.
Oh, okay, let me
churches.
stop you there. Let me stop you there. So we've got this futurist group that's going to run for 3 years. And that's kind of like the Cadillac of, hey, I'm an entrepreneurial spirit and I'm going to go all in. And so the question is, okay, so to be part of that, Team Stadia, can we get some links up here for people that might want to be part of that, who they can email? And Jeff, is that to email you, or is that Justin, or who should they email?
Yeah, I tell you what, Justin Moxley is the contact on the Futurist group. I think if you can go to stadiachurchplanting.org/phygital, that is a great place to onboard for either the learning community or the Futurist group.
Yeah, so the Futurist
digital
group,
Futurist,
just so you know, it has a higher price tag because it's going to be
yeah.
much more intense. It's a longer period of time. The 6-month learning communities are for people that go, hey, we kind of put our toe in the water and we think this might be good and we want to learn more. And that's give me an idea. How much is it a month for a church to become part of one of the 6-month cohorts?
Yeah, so the learning community at the 6-month is $750 a month. I'm doing bad math. I think it's $4,500.
Yeah.
And at the end of that, for the 6-month process, we're going into detail of a physical and virtual, a digital mindset, almost a digital first mindset of how we're structuring things. Once again, we've got a digital strategy now. Let's figure out how to add physical buildings to it. Let's not go back to the normal. Let's talk about utilizing Church Online to create community, utilizing small groups to manufacture disciple makers, unleashing these people, mobilizing them, unleashing them into micro locations, looking at technology like DJ Soto, like VR Church, creating community via mobile apps and other areas. And so it's how to help your physical church through digital technology thrive, grow, and even multiply. That's the end game of what we're doing.
Okay, so I did, this is not a big Stadia commercial. That's not why we were doing this. I just don't know of anyone else that's doing it. And, I said to another church pastor just yesterday, I said, hey, I don't have to sell this by any means. I'm just saying, if I were still the senior pastor of River Tree, I'd be in that futurist group because I'm just all over this. I wouldn't quit. We had, I think River Tree now has 9 multi-sites and all of that stuff, and they need to continue doing that. This is another expression of church. Now, DJ, let me come back to you because, VR is kind of that whole next level, DJ, that people are wanting to go to. And so, to jump in on that, how do they start doing that? I mean, we're going to be talking about that some, but do you have some reference point, DJ, of how can they learn VR?
Yeah, can you guys hear me? I was fixing some technical issues. Can you guys hear me?
They're good.
Okay, great, perfect. Yeah, I think it just goes back to that experimentation. Start to read up on it. Read our visitor guide at vrchurch.org. And start to discover what VR is all about. I mean, that's the same thing we've done with like computers, internet, smartphone, all these things. And VR is a technology that is in line with some of those. Some people are calling it the next computing paradigm, and that is an interesting kind of paradox or paradigm shift that we're experiencing. But yeah, and I think once you get in there, it'll start to make sense. The light bulb will come on. You'll start to experience these, metaverses. And I'll just kind of see if I can change the camera here, where you could actually build something like this if you wanted to. Like I mentioned before, the possibilities are endless. You control time and space. You could have an auditorium just like this. You could be on the moon. You could be in the Red Sea. And I think it's just a matter of getting in there, experimenting, trying it out, and it'll all start to fall in place.
So here's a great question. Does every participant need a headset, or can you just view the picture?
So yeah, there's a couple ways to do it. Primarily the VR is when you put it on and experiencing it in a 3D environment. There's also a 2D mode where you could just view it like on the screen, like you kind of watch broadcast church, but you can still control your avatar through the experience. So people can still come up to you, say hi, see how you're doing, you know, high fives and all that. And then we also broadcast as well. So for VR Church, you can experience it 3 different ways. So you don't need VR, that's the best, but you can also do it in 2D mode on your PC, and you can also watch it on broadcast. And some of our church plants, depending on the platform, even have an app. Like one of our church plants that's called Rec Room, or on the Rec Room platform, has an iOS app. So technically, you can come to VR Church on your iOS device. So these platforms that are being built for the metaverse, for virtual reality, they are thinking a ton about non-VR users. So it's a very inclusive environment.
Okay. Now, Jeff, what do you see as you're, you know, working with, you know, we're all going, we can all be gung-ho here, and, but let's say you got to go back and you got to talk to your elders or your management team. What's the step? How do you convince your leadership team that, hey, I think we need to be looking at the digital world?
Yeah, I think it's important to help people realize that this is maybe this was the future pre-COVID, but during this COVID season, life accelerated. And to the point when 5G rolls out, like this stuff is going to explode once again very quickly. Pastors, there are two different types of pastors who will have concerns. They may have theological concerns, then they may have just some, opinions or unsure. If there's a theological concern, it's a much longer conversation. If it's, hey, I need to figure out, I've got questions. What does community actually look like? What does this look like? How does this fit into what we're doing? It's have conversations. It's understand the wins of the lead pastor. Speak their language. They're passionate about evangelism. Talk about the opportunities to connect with new people. They're passionate about disciple makers. Show how you can do these things virtually. Honestly, the perception of digital church and church online is that it creates consumers. And that's the reason why pastors are against, pre-COVID, they were against this because it's a consumer mentality. That being said, in this season, we are doing an excellent job of a church of building relationships virtually. Highlight that and show that this isn't a consumer platform. This is an opportunity, whether VR, whether church online, whatever the context. There are digital communities being formed here, and people are connecting in real ways with this. And we, the church, need to reimagine what we're doing in this space. Experiment today. What better reason during the COVID season? We all have an excuse to experiment. Try something different.
It just makes me smile as we're going through this, because these thoughts keep popping in my head about, because, being a senior pastor for so long and just all the things we struggle with, consumerism in the church, we did away with church membership because membership has its privileges, and we went to church partnership. And the whole point of that was because we were creating consumers in the church. So again, this isn't a new problem that's created by digital. It's how do we attack that in general, right? In the church today. Certainly it's true in the United States, and it's a challenge all around the world. Hey, we just have a few more minutes together. So if you have questions that you would like answered, please get those up. While you're getting those questions up, I have 2 slides I want to show you. I keep pushing this. This is a free resource that we have now that you can use. Go to this link at the bottom there, Weekly Pastors Pool. This is incredible. This is available to all of us right now, where you can take a pastor's pool every week and get this data back to you about how churches are doing. And you can also, we use this with our whole staff at Stadia. And again, Stadia is 100% virtual. So I got a report this week about how our staff's doing spiritually, how they're feeling physically, are they optimistic? And it was all based out of this tool. And so let's go to the next slide. And so you can get this online and share your voice. You'll get all the data back. We don't make any money from this. This is a fantastic tool. Okay, let's come back now. And DJ, how do you do follow-up? Somebody becomes part, they show up in one of your weekend, well, now I can't even say weekend, DJ. Whenever your services gatherings are, they show up What do you do?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned not just the weekend, because part of that reimagination for us is churches always exist. We are the church, and it's not an event. It's the gathering, and so we gather many times throughout the week. Sunday tends to be an experience, but doesn't mean that's less of a church gathering that we would have midweek. But it's really no different than a physical church, as we connect with people. We build relationships with them. And then one of the things that we use outside of VR, because we're not in VR all the time, about after an hour of using VR, you're kind of fatigued and all right, I'm going to take a little break. Outside of VR, we use a platform called Discord, and Jeff alluded to that. And Discord is where the life of the church digitally happens outside of virtual reality. And so people come in and they become part of the church family that way. And there's a prayer channel, there's discipleship, there's spiritual life, there's all these, volunteering. So once we make that connection from virtual reality, it transitions into Discord, where we can have some in-depth conversations, and that shoots back into virtual reality. So it's this ecosystem that exists for relationships, discipleships, volunteering, leadership training. We just launched a seminary for VR Church, because we realized, man, we need to develop leaders at a high rate. Our church is just significantly growing pre-COVID. And now in the COVID era, it feels like it's going nuts. And so we just need a lot of leaders. So we're developing a seminary for that. So I think it's no different than a physical church as far as how they would interact with someone, relationships, and then connecting with them offline, so to speak, and then developing that into spiritual life, discipleship, and leadership empowerment.
Okay, Jeff, you and I were just having a conversation, via Stadia Work yesterday about a church out in Las Vegas that's developed a pipeline. Talk about that a little bit, maybe. Just kind of the steps that you need to think through from somebody hitting your digital gathering, if you will, to becoming fully integrated.
Yeah. The biggest problem that you're going to have in broadcasting church services, or even in virtual reality, like DJ can relate to this, where you've got people who are watching in anonymity and you're trying to discover who these people are. And the typical church service will go, okay, the church service is the front door. That leads into small groups and community. And then that from there, you get them on mission, Rick Warren's purpose-driven church, baseball diamond type of thing. And so you've got this church service, and you need to discover who these people are. And it's very difficult at times to look at it from that perspective, to discover who they are. And that's where a lot of the relationships and building that comes in. DJ, having those conversations, discovering who people are, discovering what their needs are, and then doing ministry pastorally to them, getting them connected into the right groups and the right people. Like, that approach can happen. The hardest part of it is between that service and getting them in the groups, discovering who they are. Kind of another method that I call it 1, 2, 3. It's starting with the service, groups other. Another method is much more of a disciple making. Utilize the technology to engage in relationships, which is the strong point of the technology. Meet people, disciple them to the place where they go out and reach other people. 3, 2, 1. Start with discipleship first. That feeds into community. Gather them into small groups when you get critical mass. And then when you get a lot of small groups, then launch it into a service. It's a backwards mentality, which I thought was weird. Then when I'm hanging out with my Stadia friends, they're like, hey, Jeff, that's how you plant a church. That's how you start a movement. It's not 1, 2, 3 starting with groups or with a service. It's 3, 2, 1 starting with disciple making. And it was this aha moment for me, like light bulbs going off. And it's this really exciting opportunity of things that we get to do with a digital church, reimagining it. Let's start with disciple makers and start a movement that way.
Okay, so that church out in Vegas is called The Crossing, for those of you who want to know. And essentially what they did is, and it's what I think we all need to do. So we've got this digital expression of church going on right now, but what's our, we've all, man, in local physical church world, we have a pipeline of, okay, if someone comes in, we're going to announce, we want you to fill out a welcome card. You're going to get a free coffee mug over here. And, we have a welcome to River Tree class or your next step class. We need to be thinking that through digitally online the same way. very easy. Click here if you want to know more about the church. Click here if, if you'd like to talk to someone, if you want to pray with someone. Those things are easy steps to design and take, but they don't happen by accident. They happen intentionally. Okay, we're going to wrap up here momentarily. Yeah, Jeff, come back.
Sorry, excuse me as I get all choked up. I get so excited about this. It is harder to get people to go from services to getting in groups. And so you may think there are things that you're doing in physical space that may work, that should work online. Have some intermediary steps in that path to get people connected. Even things like a casual meetup or a virtual lobby or a chance to interact in Facebook. There's more steps that are necessary. A lot of times churches get frustrated because they're not able to get people connected into groups. And we're seeing a lot of success now as people are putting more kind of intermediary, safer steps in between services and groups to get people connected with that. I'm sorry to interrupt.
You've unpacked so much of this in your podcast and in your webinars. Where can people go to access all of that?
So yeah, go to thechurch.digital. I just did a podcast on this featuring Tyler Sansom, who's the engagement pastor at First Capital Christian Church up in Corydon, Indiana. I think it's episode 67, 66, somewhere around there. Anyway, jump on thechurch.digital. There's tons of resources to help churches figure out how to do church online, how to plant a digital church, how to be phygital in this new season. Would love to connect with you guys over there as well.
Hey, DJ, I've got to ask this question. Do you collect an offering at VR Church?
Let's see. No, we haven't done that. We'd kind of do that offline. And the short story behind that is when we first went into that space, there was this reaction in virtual reality where they're like, oh, great, here comes the Christians who just want to ask for our money. So as we went in that space, we were very careful about saying, hey, give us your money, tithe, because most of the people that attend VR Church are not Christians. They're atheists, they're agnostic. It's very unique in that regard. So it's not like I'm preaching to the choir per se. This is spiritual milk, people that have never stepped in church before. And so only recently have we started integrating the idea of giving from the stage, and we direct people to our website. And I'm sure there's technology coming where we could pass the Bitcoin plate around, and that could totally be a thing. But it's not necessarily a tactile experience at VR Church, but it's definitely part of our culture as we relate it to the website.
DJ, one of the things that I am so excited about, because I love the generosity of God's people, and it's just so amazing. And one of the things I'm most excited about, again, back to my experience at River Tree over the years, we had at the time when we put it up, $13 million campus as our central location, and man, it became so much about how do I keep the financial engine of the church running? And I'm not telling people not to put up buildings and,
right,
rent things and stuff. But man, I just love the day when we can say to our church online, look, we do have to pay salaries for pastors, and we do have to have technology and those things. But the reality is, 90% of our money, we can say, hey, in your local context, would you take your money this week, and would you invest that in your local community somehow? Or we're going to have, we're going to plant a church, and we're going to help these church planters do this, and all the money we raise. And I believe virtual and digital church is going to be one of the keys to unlocking hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars for the church to transform the world in Jesus' name. So I'm really excited that, hey, DJ, you've been a pioneer. You've taken the hard knocks. Your family, I know you were traveling a lot trying to, get this launched. Thank you for the sacrifices you've made to lead the way. And
thank you. That's so nice to hear. It's always encouraging to have kind of wind at our back. Sometimes we feel like there's spit in our face, but the reaction to VR Church can tend to be negative. And so it's really nice that you say that. It's really encouraging, and I'll probably tell my wife, and she'll be encouraged about that as well. So yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate that.
And DJ, I'm looking forward, and I know Jeff as well. You guys are great friends, but I'm looking forward to how we can partner together to, literally plant 10,000 churches a year, in the digital space. There's no reason not to, right, my friend? So let's do that. Jeff, thank you for your leadership at Stadia and throughout the United States and around the world. It's been amazing. Hey, this webinar is being recorded. You know, as you're sitting here, I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, our entire staff at Stadia needs to watch this. And so let's make sure once it's, you know, comes out, we'll be rendering it over the next 24 hours, and then it'll be available at stadiachurchplanting.org and or on our Facebook feed. And so you can get it there, you know, show this to your pastors, your buddies, your other leaders. And thanks so much for joining us from Stadia Church Planting.
Yeah, thanks for letting me speak today. I really appreciate it.